Lovely spring day. I want to thank you all for coming out. I'm Aggie Malter. I'm the Executive Director of PAISBOA, and we're delighted to have all of you here today to talk about what appears to be a very exciting topic for all of you. So just a couple of things. We have some snacks and drinks over there, so when you need them, they're right there. Restrooms are on the first floor. If you find them crowded, there's another set on the second floor. Use the power of 2 feet. When you feel like you have to step out or you need to take a phone call or do whatever, just do what you need to do. We'll be taking a break at lunchtime and feeding you a delicious lunch. So I think that's all of the housekeeping issues. I do want to say this is a topic that is really important, and like the zero-based budgeting workshop we had last week, the forms are not the magic. The magic is in the conversations and the inclusion of your whole school community in this process. So I know that Carolyn and Margaret have some great stories to tell you. I would be remiss if I didn't say something about a couple of people who are doing this elsewhere around the country. So David Lacey has been a big part of helping schools sort of look at this compensation banding, and he's a consultant that travels around and works with a lot of different schools, so you might find his work interesting. And Karen Illig, who was at Westtown, who is now at the Pinecrest School, is also someone who's really interested in this topic as well. So if you want to, after you've been formally introduced to this, if you want to follow up with either of those two, or, search out their writing or their presentations on the internet, feel free to do so. They're two great resources for you. And without further ado, I would like to present to you Carolyn Hapeman and Dr. Margaret Haviland.
So good morning, everyone. My name is Carolyn Hapeman, and I'm the Chief Financial Officer at Westtown School. I wanted to share with you today that a couple months ago, or several months ago, Margaret suggested that she create a proposal for NAIS about this topic for a 3-hour workshop. And she asked if I'd be willing to be a co-presenter. And I said, sure, knowing that we'd never get accepted, that the proposal would never get accepted. At least I was hopeful. And it turns out that it did get accepted. Margaret did a lot of the work, a huge part of the work, and it was really an informative workshop at NAIS. And we have since received a lot of calls from some people in this room, but several people not in this room. And so we thought we'd kind of do a redo of what we did at NAIS. And so that's how we ended up here today. The other thing I'll share too is that I am just finishing my second year at Westtown. So a large part of this work and heavy lifting was done by people before me. I'm just here with Margaret to help tell the story and be a resource for you. So just kind of wanted to give you that context before we get started. So just to run over today's agenda introductions, you already heard from me, and Margaret will introduce herself shortly. The real focus of today is, first telling you our story. This is not prescriptive and this is how you do banding. This is just sharing what our journey has been through this whole process in banding and who's been involved and what's gone well and what hasn't gone so well. After we unpack the story, we'll have a short break close to 11 o'clock and time for questions right after that. On your table, this is what we did at NAS as well, and it worked well. There are 3x5 cards, and if to keep the flow of the workshop, if you would just write any questions that you have on those 3x5 cards, I'll be coming around and collecting them, and we'll answer questions in groups after each break. And again, that just kind of keeps things moving along. After our first round of questions, we'll be looking at Westtown's mission and compensation, and again, part of our story, and give you some time in groups and at your table to brainstorm about your mission and your current compensation system. I believe most of you probably brought, or at least know in your head, what what your structure is for compensation and evaluation at your schools. We'll have a short break again, close to the hour, around noon. And in the interest of getting everyone out and on the road as quickly as possible, we'll probably break for just 15 minutes and grab food, and we'll just keep going. I assume no one will have objections to that. Again, I'll collect cards, and Margaret and I will answer any questions, and end up with some things about where you are now and where you want to be, and maybe give you some tools to move forward in this area. So I will now turn it over to Margaret.
So I'm Margaret Haviland. I've been at Westtown 21 years. I started out as a history teacher, not as someone interested in salaries, evaluation systems, or human resources, although that has been my growth professionally over the last probably decade of my time at Westtown. So that's a little bit about me and Carolyn. What we would like to do so we can have a productive workshop is I'd really like you to introduce yourselves to a couple people at your table that you don't know, that you're close to. We don't, and to describe to that person your role at your school. Describe your school in 2 sentences to a neighbor so that you get to know each other, and then a little bit about where you and your school is currently in your thinking about faculty compensation. So we'll do this for about maybe 5 or 6 minutes. So introduce yourself, who you are, your school in 2 sentences, where you are in your own thinking. So you're going to give them 5 minutes.
Yep.
What they don't do.
Well, I was worried because heads are just naturally chatty, right? They like to talk more easily.
Well, these are pretty concrete things.
I wonder who's texting me. There's a lady in the school who's looking for a seminar.
In Southwest Philadelphia. Accessing Southwest.
I'm not sure how they missed that.
Okay.
I forget what the address is here.
I'm the head of school there. We're a K-8 survey population.
Something Ivan.
Growing up.
Ivan Avenue.
Yeah, just leave it.
Bradford Township building.
We really don't have a good compensation.
301 Ivan Avenue.
Yeah. Negotiation with pretty much as head of school.
Oh, maybe it's Pat. But I had her save as the contact. My introduction, okay?
Yeah.
I've been like 16 years.
It's funny that Aggie said they're spies who will report back.
And actually, Stacy is our first director. Yeah. We really never had anybody in that. Yep. Me and a treasurer. Yeah. A board treasurer. Yeah. So I was wearing a business hat too.
David gets slammed with calls.
We have grown. Our academic program is really strengthened. We've become accredited in 16 years. So, yeah.
What's after this slide?
How long is
It's another talk to you. More talk.
Wow. Okay.
This one.
Oh, yeah. I did, the only thing I did to this is I changed some of the font to be a little bigger. If you notice, and then there were a few slides that were really empty and didn't have pictures, and I just added pictures. So,
Great.
yeah.
Cameron kind of ran out of time.
Yeah, well, it looked great. People aren't going to notice, but I just thought these most people I know. So make it work.
Is your thing going to beep at us?
I am really sad we're missing the all-school meeting for school.
I am too.
Except I knew that a lot. Is that an injury?
My hand in the spring gets really mucked up.
Is it from gardening?
It's from gardening and so
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
I could keep myself. If I wear a glove, I'd just now working on it twice.
And are you like the resident directors of the
Over 4 faculty in one day a week. You're on video.
Okay.
Does Karen have her favorite sport for next year?
She's going to do field hockey and lacrosse again.
Yeah.
And she's actually going to do field hockey camp in the summer.
Is the team going to do that?
Several do. But she really is someone who just does what she wants to do. I mean, it's okay if her friends don't do it, but she's committed to improving. So it's really good, very respectable.
Yeah.
And the one she, remember I told you how she scored a goal, like which is almost a miracle in lacrosse. And it's the one game where Jeff and I, he was in the hospital.
Oh.
So
It's just around the corner. You just go out the door, walk the dog.
we go to every game, and that one game. We even go to some of our away games too, especially when it's a really nice day and not too far away.
Yeah.
Yeah, she's making work. She's taking biology this summer too. That's our 5 minutes.
Oops. All right. So now that you know each other, we have another set of questions to keep the conversation going a little bit longer, again, so that you can lay the groundwork and hopefully have your minds thinking about this work and what it might mean at your school. So again, with your neighbors, remember, change is hard and rewarding, and as you are sitting with your neighbors, spend about 5 minutes sharing with each other something, one of the last major changes that you experienced at your school that you had to manage, and think about what went well and what didn't go so well. Because what Carolyn and I are going to share with you is a huge change at our school, and I would imagine that for you to undertake similar work would be a major change to manage. So again, a little sharing out of a last major change issue that you managed and what went well and what didn't go so well. So again, about 5 minutes.
Do you know the biology teacher?
What?
Do you know the biology teacher who's teaching this summer?
No. It's not Dana, is it? I don't
No, it's someone outside.
Yeah, no, that was a little messy because they hired the person. And then somebody else decided that they wanted to do it. I don't know. Or it was somebody that knew. All I know is we'd already offered it.
Someone had asked me what I thought about it, come back, and then offered it to the other person.
I remember that, yeah.
My suggestion is it's probably not a good idea, but if it was good, she's now getting really involved. So,
And Chris will less involved, which is good.
so it's funny you should bring that up because I had my weekly meeting with Keith yesterday, and he was sharing with me some confusion, really concern, probably more confusion about Chris feeling like she really needs to be here, feeling like it's okay, I got this, but not wanting to proceed. And so this morning, and Nancy already sent it to me, I just asked for a copy of Chris's contract just to get clarity. And Summer isn't mentioned.
No, Summer's a separate contract.
Yes, and she doesn't have one at all.
I don't know. Now, the thing that I worry about is when Pete says he's got it, Chris has very specific licenses for the work she does. he doesn't have those licenses, and unless the person that has hired does, I think from a risk management thing, that for many years,
He has said that I've gotten this before and it hasn't, right? So I know that
I think that that's, yeah.
So I'm trying to figure out a delicate way to tease that out. Because I don't even know. Like, I don't want
Yeah,
to
I think that we should understand what Chris's concerns are. Yeah, sure.
Okay. That would be really helpful. And
Yeah.
then help me navigate it.
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
Okay.
Because I think that's really
Because I kind of want to get ahead of it. Because I don't want to be like July and then suddenly there's all this tension around how someone's doing something.
And who does he have? Does he have Melissa McLaughlin? Now, we did send Melissa last summer. How is Marion water project?
Well, and there's all sorts of
I mean,
libraries.
besides the fact that she is a library, there is
Okay, so that lets me
yeah.
what her figure out how to
I mean, Melissa is way cheaper, I'm sure, than Chris.
yeah. Generally it's not. So, okay, that makes me feel better because I felt it was lost. It's kind of straddling, a couple different things. And I really concerned me because I've got it's just well intended and not trying to trick her to see.
Where is it? Well, just a bit like he says he had it last year, not this year, last year, with professional support. And he was in the youth, and parents weren't happy, teachers weren't happy, and kids weren't happy. And when you have
Okay. 1 minute, and there's my credit card. It's Apple Pay. So when I go to the grocery store, I just hold that up, and that's how I pay with my thumbprint.
that's kind of cool.
Yeah. Jeff and Mary keep me on top of technology.
That often.
I do. Most of the time, it's just a chip goes in, and
But the last 3 times I've taken my advisors out, I've only wants that number. And the first time I was like, and I did. I had it in my phone, on my contact.
yeah.
And so now, one more time, and I'll have the number.
It's funny. But that sense of panic, like this would be embarrassing. Yeah. So the next, okay, that's the next.
So we've got our story, just to kind of preview, and then you, why did we do this work,
Yeah.
and the roles at Westtown. All right, now that we know each other, and we're ready to engage with each other throughout the rest of the morning and through lunch, Carolyn and I are going to spend a little time telling you our Westtown story. And so this is really what this is the part about where we share with you our experience. And Westtown School, for those of you who don't know, is a K-12 day and boarding school located outside of Westchester, Pennsylvania, on 600 acres of campus. We have about 670 students, and we have probably 80 teaching faculty in all 3 divisions. And our short story, as you can see on the slide, is we went from 64 steps on our salary scale or salary ladder. Now, that's really small increments. Remember, we're a day and boarding school, so we had a salary ladder for our day school faculty and for our boarding faculty, and there was a differential in there with the boarding faculty who had on-campus housing being paid less than their than a teacher who would have been at the same step in the day program. So that's what we're talking about when we did have 64 steps. We were paying out 25 different kinds of stipends before we made this shift. Everything from a dorm head was paid a stipend for being the dorm head. Dorm parents got a stipend. If you'd been in the dorms for more than 5 years, there was a stipend. There were stipends for running collection, which is announcements. There were stipends for taking on extra advisees, stipends for being the middle school dean, stipends for running our 360 evaluation system with me and being a clerk. I mean, we had 25 different stipends. To those 80 teaching faculty, we paid out 200 of these stipends. You can imagine our finance office people were spending hours going through these notes because they often were letters that I would sign saying so-and-so ran 3 evaluations this year and gets this amount of money for that. And then the finance office people had to enter that into our salary system and make sure it all came out in the end. About $200,000 by the time I traced down, and I have to say this was one of the biggest parts of the early work was ferreting out all of the stipends and figuring out what they were and how much money that was. And we went from all of that to 4 salary bands grounded in our school's mission, which was really important. And as we go into more depth in this story, I hope that you will see mirrors, things that resonate with you that feel the same at your school, or windows, ways through that you might say, oh, this is something that we might want to explore. I mean, Carolyn and I really do respect the fact that you and your school have your own missions, you have your own challenges, and you will find your own way forward to whatever salary system you end up choosing in the end, because we don't presume to be experts on a particular system. This is our story and how we ended up with where we ended up. And Carolyn's going to give you a little bit of the background of why we did this work. Besides this complex short story, there is a larger context for this work.
So some of these Margaret already alluded to, but the confinement of a salary ladder was becoming more and more difficult. And this mostly was obvious in our recruiting efforts. So we had a very stringent ladder that everyone had to fit in perfectly, and our HR department or our principals would be making offers to faculty members based on this rigid ladder, and we would often not get our first choice candidates. And that was really frustrating for a lot of people to be, kind of have our hands tied with this ladder and no flexibility. Along with the salary ladder, there really was no way to award excellence or recognize, faculty who are going above and beyond. You were just on that ladder, whether you were a A performer or a C performer. I mean, you had the same pay no matter what. The stipends that she's already alluded to, which stipends, and more stipends, were really problematic. Liz, who's our director of finance, is here, and so is our HR manager. They had to tease through piles and piles and piles of letters, and just making sure there's some equity. But it also created, as I'm sure you can imagine, and maybe you have at your school, a culture of, sure, I'll do that for a stipend. So there is very much a entitlement, which we created ourselves. I certainly don't blame the faculty for having that mentality, but it created a culture. I'll go the extra mile, but only if I get a stipend. So that was certainly a problem. As far as demographics, and I'm sure you're seeing this as well. I mean, every generation, Gen X, Gen Y, whatever, they have their own set of personality, needs, wishes, and all of that. And we were finding that, in particular, the younger faculty, didn't like that everyone was paid the same no matter how they contributed to the school based on this ladder. And that's certainly not surprising based on all the research about the different generations. So that was becoming more and more of a pain point in not being able to recognize and meet the needs and wants of some of our younger faculty. And lastly, at least on a broader scale, we did a survey of parents and current students. And there was just a lot of feedback that excellence in teaching, no big surprise here, but excellence in teaching was a really top priority and needed to continue to be a top priority. And we felt at the time that, and it proved to be true, that this confining ladder and stipend system wasn't supporting faculty excellence in the way that we needed and wanted at the time. And it wasn't, it was certainly a concern of the board as well, making sure that our compensation system supported faculty excellence. And that was a key piece of it. And last, in this slide in particular, morale. It was not, when compensation isn't aligned with mission or what you're driving toward, and there's dissatisfaction, it obviously becomes a morale issue. So that's kind of the larger story for us.
I'll just chime in and say that the board
Please.
also had a concern about the quality of the faculty across all faculty, because the part of this survey was both current parents and attrited parents, and there were some concerns indicated back. This survey was done in 2011-12. So the board, along with charging us to work on this, also had this other charge to deal with raising the consistency, the floor, if you will, on faculty quality.
Thanks. So I want to just go through some of the key roles in this project. And first and most importantly is the board. That they need to understand the issues. They need to champion and be your biggest cheerleader in making these changes and supporting it. And obviously your head of school as well. If you don't have the support at the top, this is going to be a losing battle. Would be my statement of the day. So John Baird, our head of school, was very instrumental in shepherding this along with Margaret. The CFO, me, and prior to me, Karen Illig. Karen did far more work on this project than I did, and I kind of came at the very end. But she spent a lot of time crunching the numbers, working with the consultant, David Lacey, as to how to make all the numeric pieces work and set it up in a budget way that made sense for the institution. So the CFO is certainly a kingpin in all of this. The assistant head of school, Margaret, in our case, I realize schools of various sizes don't necessarily have an assistant head of school, but we do, and Margaret has been instrumental in shepherding this in spite of some changes in staff, such as the CFO. The divisional principals, so we have a lower school, middle school, and high school, and all of those principals were very, very intimately involved in this process. And I'm not sure if we mentioned this later, but it was really a culture change for the principals to have full insight into what all their faculty were making. Prior to this, the head of school and the CFO and obviously the HR department were the only ones who knew what anyone made. And now our principals are very heavily involved in what every single faculty member makes. And so that was a major change that we're still adjusting to, I would say. And then obviously the faculty, and Margaret will talk more about how their involvement has been, throughout this whole process.
All right.
This is my favorite cartoon of the whole time.
Don't you like this? A little bit about our process. I mean, the head of school created a committee. Isn't this great? I mean, that is what happened. I will say that coming out of our strategic plan, we're in the 5th year of our current strategic plan. This was probably John Baird's one of his top 2 initiatives coming out of the strategic plan. And since he asked me to co-clerk the committee that came out of this, first with Karen Illig and then later with Carolyn, this has been my primary work for the last now 5 years. I mean, this has been what I wake up and think about, which is kind of interesting when you think I started out thinking about the American Revolution in my career. So anyway, John put this committee together. It was clerked by myself and Karen Illig, and Karen hired David Lacey as the consultant, in part because he had experience with other schools in the area. He was able to bring and able to do work for us that we couldn't do. Most importantly, in some respects, was the market analysis, which was very important. So remember, we were creating not only a salary system, but we were also, and what we did do, we did a market adjustment. So we were doing 2 things at the same time in many respects. And it is a little bit important to remember that there are schools who will create a different salary system, and their salaries are already market aligned. Ours were not. We, on this committee, besides myself and Karen, we had one of the divisional principals was on the committee from the beginning. They often would rotate through so that we didn't have to have all 3 of them all the time. And we had a faculty member from each division who was on the committee from the beginning and then all the way up through the recommendation to the head of school. And then when we got to the place where we were going to be placing faculty in bands, obviously the faculty members of the committee stepped off the committee at that point. So we did this work. The committee, as I said, the committee met every 6 weeks for almost 18 months. There was frequent reporting out to teachers. I think that's really important. From my first time standing before the faculty in faculty meetings in the summer of August 2013, I was in front of the faculty or the faculty reps to the committee were in front of the faculty probably a total altogether of 18 times, more or less, to let them know where we were going, what we were thinking, and to get feedback. And that was really important. I've talked to 2 schools since we did this work who both reported horror stories of systems that were imposed on faculty with no input, and both ended rather disastrously. So I would say that, regardless of your school culture, Westtown tends to be a fairly egalitarian school. So that faculty voice was important, obviously, but at any school, you're going to need your faculty to understand the change that's happening. The principals and the members of the committee, we devised a plan that was grounded in Westtown's values for the rollout. And I think that that's really important. How you choose to roll out a change as major as this really does need to fit into your culture. And there were different ways we could have done this. Our consultant made recommendations. We thought about this as a committee. We asked, in particular, the faculty members of the committee what they thought and their input. And they were really clear that even though we were shifting from a system where it looked like everybody was being treated exactly the same in the latter system, that in this shift we needed to maintain that culture of equity. And so everyone, our choice as a committee was that everyone would be placed, once we decided to go to the band system, everyone would be placed into their band as though the system had been in place for a number of years. So it wasn't as though we took every teacher and said, you've been here this many years, you're going to, regardless, we're going to put you at the bottom of the band, which is one way that some schools choose to do it. Another thing that we chose to do was, besides placing everybody as though the system had been in place, the other thing that we chose to do was to move everybody towards their target the same distance. There are schools who have chosen to take their stars and move them all the way there, and everybody else some percentage of the way there. And we decided to move everybody the same distance towards their target. I should say, when it became apparent that we couldn't get everybody all the way to their target. So, I mean, there's some budget pieces, and then the budget constraints shaped some choices that we made, which we did with input from the faculty members on our committee and with the divisional principals and with a little input from the board, but the board concerns were a little bit different. So that work was important. The summer between when the report was accepted by the head of school and when we began to talk to faculty, the divisional principals and I spent probably 40 hours, more or less, placing collectively every single teacher in the band system. So imagine normally we go off in the summer and we just scatter to the winds and we're in and out. We, as a group of leaders, realized that it was important that across all three divisions we were aligned and in agreement about the decisions we were making about individual teachers. That would be really important to the faculty to know that they could trust that that they were being seen by all the divisional principals and myself and the head of school and placed fairly. In the fall, before, as this was rolling out, in the fall, every teacher had a 45 to 60-minute conversation with their divisional director about their band placement. And they really did take that long. I mean, I can't think of any conversation that was under 45 minutes. And in about a half dozen cases, there were follow-up conversations. Interestingly enough, the follow-up conversations, 2 of them happened with more senior faculty who hadn't been paying attention to their appointment letters in the previous years, and they thought that they had been teaching more years than they had been, which is kind of interesting, actually. And so I had to go back through and check when they were actually hired, dig through resumes, and find out that actually, no, they just hadn't been paying attention and had thought they'd been working long. So I mean, it was kind of an interesting thing. And we had 3 younger teachers, all of whom just really thought that they just shouldn't be held back by the fact that they'd only been teaching 3 or 4 years, that their 2 years in graduate school or their year running a day camp or their student teaching all should count for something. So it's just very interesting that the 2 groups that, and they were very small groups, so we had to have follow-up conversations, were largely around an inflated sense of my value to the school and losing track of how many years you've been teaching. So I think that that's just a very interesting piece to keep in mind. And that's kind of our timeline in the appointment letters for this year. So faculty got their appointment letters for 16-17 last year, and those appointment letters were the first time that they saw on their appointment letter their band placement, where they were in their band, and their new salary, and no stipends. I will say that we now have 0 stipends at Westtown. And somebody said to me the other day, or about a month ago, well, maybe we should create a stipend, and I was just going to break out in hives. I said, no. There's a way to do this within the band structure to recognize the work that this person is doing. And in fact, that is a lot of the work that the principals did in placing people, was figuring out, so what does it mean within the band placement? This teacher is in this band, the experienced teacher band, and they're the middle school dean, and they started 3 great new programs in the last 2 years. Like what does that mean for their placement in the band? And that's the work that the principals did. And then again, this summer we will meet as a principals group to test where we are and to make sure that our faculty continue to be in the right place. We are in a 2-year market adjustment. So we placed everybody. We were able to get them half the way there, and Carolyn's going to talk about that more. And this year, for the 17-18 appointment letters, we were able to move them closer to their target. But that's kind of where we are. We are also this year experimenting with an annual evaluation for faculty, which is a shift, and I'll talk more about that. But I would say that we will have fully implemented this program probably in 1819. So we are still in midstream in some respects. I don't know what you
Leave my notes. I will just emphasize that with all of those 80-some faculty, that only 6 really wanted to dig deeper and question their placement in the band. I think actually from a data standpoint, that's pretty good. There was so much work collectively done by the principals that getting that band placement correct out of the gate is really important. And I commend the group for doing such a good job, because 6 is a pretty low number, in my opinion. And for all the rest, it was actually, and maybe I'll touch on this later, but it was actually a very affirming exercise, like, oh, you actually do know what all I'm doing. So many of those one-on-one meetings with faculty, the very large majority, it was an affirming meeting versus a you're only here. It's like, wow, look at all the things you're doing, and we recognize that. So that's just an add-on to what you said. No. Yes, you can.
I don't want to ruin your routine.
I'm flexible, yeah.
When you were looking at the bands and moving people presumably up, did people move down as well?
No one moved down.
Okay.
Right.
And when, the whole stipend thing is so interesting, because people get stipend to do a job, and then they stop doing that job, but their stipend doesn't go away.
Well,
It should
should go
but a lot
away.
of times it doesn't. So did you account for those kinds of things as well?
Yeah. I mean, Margaret spent weeks just teasing out all of that detail, for sure. Yeah. Margaret made a really important point, and just to re-emphasize it, there are 2 pieces for Westtown. There was changing the compensation structure altogether, but also making sure our salaries were competitive in the market, and we weren't, and we're getting very close to that. So it's twofold, and so we knew that we had to do a market salary survey, and Westtown is a little bit of a unicorn because we're pre-K through 12 boarding and day, and there's not a lot of schools like us out there. So this was one area in which David Lacey, one of the many areas that he was really helpful in going out and getting all the data related to faculty. And there are lots and lots of surveys out there. Obviously, PAISBOA. We're in other groups specific to boarding schools. There's NAIS. But because of our unicorn nature, we also looked at some other schools like Cranbrook, Milton, Stevenson, Wyoming Seminary, just to add to the data mix, because we knew we had to broaden it a bit. What we had to define as competitive salaries was we wanted to be, I want to make sure I get this right, the top 10% of...
No, so we had to define what competitive meant for us. So David did a market study, and he told us what people were being paid, and then we had to decide what for us was competitive.
Yeah, that's
and
right.
what were we willing to do? Were we willing to say that we were going to benchmark and try to aim for 10% of the market, the really high end, 75%, 30%? We decided that for us, we would do the 50% market midpoint. So we pegged our salary bands to the midpoint for the
4 bands.
For the bands. That's right. So we're trying to get our faculty within a range that is about at the 50% mark for a faculty member in roughly that same position, same number of years, same experience, same value to the school.
And once we had all this market salary study and started to hone in on what our targets were going to be, Karen then spent a lot of time doing financial modeling to see what this would look like from a financial perspective to make sure we could actually pull this off.
And so remember, we're doing a market study, and we're also looking at salary systems. when we went to NAIS that year, we actually, John Baird and I made a point to go to every session that discussed salary. And we ended up hearing from schools who were doing things within their salary ladder, which were creative, and we're giving them some flex within their hiring, within their evaluation systems and any number of other things. So we looked at that. We also looked at a model called a base plus model, which is the idea that everybody comes in at the same base salary, and then there's an incremental increase for every year you've been teaching. On top of that, there was a piece around teaching roles. So a classroom teacher was given a bigger percentage pay on top of the base and years of teaching for their role as classroom teacher versus art teacher. And then on top of that, they were able to earn 3% more salary based on how much professional development they did. There wasn't an evaluative piece in this system, although there could have been. I talked with that head of school, and he was wondering how he might add an evaluative piece to it, but they weren't there yet. And then, of course, we looked at faculty band systems. There were a couple of schools in the region who were a couple of years ahead of us. Of course, Haverford School has been doing this for a long time. Green Street Friends had also made a shift to bands probably 2 years before we started this work, and we had talked with them a little bit. Both of them have band systems. They do and don't resemble Westtown's, and they fit their schools and their school cultures, and I think that's important to remember. Our consultant, David, was working with 2 other schools at the time. One was 2 years ahead of us, and one was about a year ahead of us in their process. And that was really helpful to be able to understand the systems. Ultimately, we decided to go with bands and to go with 4 bands. I talked with a school out on Long Island who had 3 bands. I talked with another school who had 5 bands. That felt like a lot. We were trying to do something that felt good for Westtown, and so that's where we ended up. But we did look at other systems, and I think that that's important to think about, because what worked for us and made sense for us might not have made sense for somebody else. I will also say that this shift fit in with shifts that we had been working on for a number of years. We had already created a culture of professional growth among faculty. Their faculty expect to write professional goals. We've been doing that since 2009. Since 11-12, we have been ensuring that all faculty get an evaluation at least every 4 years. That's the 360 evaluation system. We meshed that with our onboarding system. We now talk about a 4-year induction program at Westtown, which starts with the first year, lots of support, lots of feedback. Every sort of sports season is the easiest way to talk about it. First-year teachers are sitting down with supervisors and getting feedback with a formal letter at the end of the year. The second year, there's again lots of support. And then we have the third year with a peer coaching model, and then we have this 360 evaluation. When we adopted this system, the board was really clear we needed to figure out how to do more frequent evaluations after the 4th year, and that's where we have been working through this annual evaluation system for faculty that we're piloting, which is based a little bit on independent school management system of annual faculty evaluation, and we also looked at Danielson. Danielson is probably, from the faculty's point of view, more granular than felt like in our culture made sense. So it informs what we do, our mission informs what we do, and you'll see a little bit of that as we work through the workshop and the rest of the presentation. But just to give you a sense of, again, we were looking for things to build on what we were already doing, rather than, even though we were doing a big culture shift around salary, we weren't doing a big culture shift around faculty expectations as professionals. And I think that that really helped us in the rollout. So here we are. We ended up, as I said, with 4 bands. We'll talk a little bit more about this after the break, but just to give you a sense, that starting teacher is someone in his or her first 5 years, so years 0 through 5. They come out of college, they come out of a graduate program, they've got 0 experience owning and being responsible for their own classroom.
You should all have the 4 bands as a handout that she's
Yeah.
referring to. So.
Right. And then our experienced teacher is an automatic move. After the 5th year, the divisional principal, it's not automatic. The divisional principal makes that decision, but it's a pretty straightforward yes or no decision by the divisional principal. And again, you're in the experienced teacher band from years 5 through years 12, and you'll see the descriptions that you have in front of you both are similar in that there is a piece around years of experience, there's a piece around what you do in relation to the school's mission, there's basic expectations. You'll also notice that the language becomes more demanding as you move up through the bands. So that to become a master teacher, you have to have a master's degree or an equivalent. I have our earth literacy teacher, our farm teacher right now. There are no good master's programs in being a master farm teacher. So Westchester University has a great certificate program. For him, that will fulfill the requirement to be a master's degree. I think one of the things to note also is that from experienced teacher to master teacher, again, this is something that the divisional principal owns and works with the teacher on making that movement. We have 4 teachers at Westtown who will spend the summer creating the portfolio that they will then present to myself, the head of school, a colleague, and their divisional principal as part of their process of being recommended to the head of school to become a master teacher for the 18-19 year. So this is something that they're working on now, and it will come into actual reality in their next appointment letter. The faculty leader, this is a head of school designation. And it's a pretty lofty place to be, and right now Westtown, out of 80 faculty, has 5 faculty leaders. And as divisional principals and as the group that really did all this placement 2 summers ago, I have to think about it, I lose track. 2 summers ago, one of the things that we really talked about is what does it mean if we think we only have 5 folks out of 80 who are faculty leaders? And that was something for us to really wrestle with. But in the end, I think we felt really good because these 5 people, every other faculty member, in fact, every employee at Westtown says, oh yeah, like there's no question as to who these people are. There's none of this, really? And there are a couple other placements where people have sort of said, really? But these 5, nobody has said that. And there hasn't been anybody who said, wait a minute, why isn't so-and-so in this group? Which has been really, really important. Yeah, so those are our 4 bands, and you have the descriptions, and we'll talk a little bit more about them later in the presentation. So just a little bit, Carolyn's going to do a little bit on the how it works.
So in an effort to avoid collusion, these are all fake numbers, but I at least want you to understand the math behind it. Remember, we did the salary survey, and we're going for the midpoint, 100% in the middle. And each band starts at 80% market and ends at 120% market. And the goal is to get everyone to their midpoint. And you'll notice the midpoint of, say, band 1 is the starting point for band 2. And that is how it works the whole way down. And this has been, when we have aha moments, I'll talk to you about some of the complexities around this, but it's very clear to faculty, you don't, most of our faculty, and I would say people in the banding system, will end their career in the master teacher category. And they have a really clear path on how to move through each band. And again, this is just sample math, but generally we were targeting the midpoint, and once you are starting to go past that, we need to start having conversations about getting you into the next band and what that means and looks like for each individual faculty member. And just as a reminder, since we are getting close to a break, remember there are cards on your table. If you have some questions that are cropping up, be sure to write them down, and I'll be around to collect them.
Just to say that Carolyn mentioned faculty have some agency over how they move through the bands. I mean, the descriptions, we in essence created 4 job descriptions. We didn't have job descriptions for a teacher before this, and now we have 4 job descriptions for teachers. Teachers understand when they look at the descriptions what it takes to move forward in the band and how to get to the next band. There are some year minimum requirements, and we've had a couple of teachers test us on that, and we've been able to actually hold on that and say, no, really, you are doing an amazing job in the experienced teacher band, and we recognize that, and in 2 years' time, when we're done market adjusting and we are able to flex a little bit around recognition for excellence, we will be able to work with you there. But we are not going to say you're a master teacher before you've been teaching for 12 years, regardless of how fantastic you are. I mean, I think faculty have to trust that the system does what it says it's going to do. Anyway. So, aha moments.
You start with some, and I'll
Yeah.
add some.
So, as I mentioned before, as I said, we have 5 faculty leaders. That summer, we talked long and hard about it. We actually initially only had 1 faculty leader, and that was too conservative. As I said, we adjusted in January of last year and ended up with 5, which we were much happier with. Interestingly enough, the board, which asked us to do this work, when it came time to roll it out to the faculty, Carolyn and I made a presentation to the faculty, and the executive committee of the board said, wait a minute, we don't think we can do this. After we had already presented to them in October and said we were going to be talking to the faculty in November, and then in late November, in a meeting, they said, no, we really don't think you can do this. Because they were worried that faculty were going to be unhappy and that they were going to have to clean up. And in fact, the faculty were actually not unhappy. The faculty were happy. I mean, I will say the faculty were happy because when we made this presentation, they could do the math in their heads. By then, Carolyn had already projected that we would be able to get people halfway, which meant for a large swath of the faculty that they were getting a substantial raise, as much as in some cases there were some faculty who were going to get 8 to 10% salary increase, just even going halfway to their target, which was huge. And younger faculty, who because they were the most heavily stipended, weren't going to get as much of it wasn't going to look as big because the stipends went away and they got buried into their base. They were able to do the math and see how that applied to their TIA-CREF 403B contribution, whereas stipends don't count towards 403B. In our plan. So I mean, it was really good. We weren't surprised that the younger faculty embraced this shift, that mid-career faculty embraced it because they could see how it made sense financially, and that our most senior faculty were the ones that were most longing to stay with the old system where they knew everybody was being treated the same. I will say that the principals, the other big thing about this is that the principals, of which our principals group is myself, the 3 divisional principals, our head of school, and our athletic director, we all had to work very closely together on this. And I think that gave the faculty a high degree of confidence. Open communication and transparency has been key. It was key in our culture before, and as I said earlier, this would have never worked if we hadn't maintained that. So,
Two other aha moments that I'll share. One is, and I don't know if there are any board members here or not, but even before that, they kind of kept forgetting, what is banding? We had done many presentations about this big change, and every board meeting it was like the reset button here's what, and I'm guessing some of you, based on the smiles, have experienced this as well. But it was just a constant reminder, because we were living in it, especially Margaret, daily. It had left their mind as soon as they had left campus. So we had to kind of keep re-educating them. The other aha moment is, you remember the 4 bands and the math on that. We definitely could have done a better job in communicating that we were shooting for the midpoint, because a lot of people thought, here's the band, well, of course I'm at the top because I'm great, right? And really having clarity around our compensation strategy, and articulating that in a way that they understood. We definitely could have done a better job. I mean, it wasn't a disaster, but it wasn't clear, because people saw those ranges and they immediately went to the right. Ah, great. So that's just a word of caution.
All right, so we're going to take a break in about 1 minute. But before we take that break, it'd be great if, again, turn to your partner and a friend and sort of think for a moment of things that you are interested in knowing more about, or things that have struck you in what we've said, things that resonate with you at your school, or you think this would never work. So again, a little conversation, and then
I'll collect cards.
yeah, and then also take a couple minutes to write down your questions that you have on cards, and Carolyn and I will come around and collect them, and we'll converse for maybe 5 minutes, and then Carolyn and I will turn on the break clock. So we'll take a little bit of a break. But first, things that you find interesting, or your takeaways from the presentation so far. So you want to set your thing for 3 minutes?
Yep.
Is there anything you feel like you haven't said? Like,
I've been checking the notes that you've added when I wasn't there, and I've added some things when I did not. I think the next section's kind of the hardest from a presentation standpoint.
let me. Do you have the band descriptions?
I'll start collecting. I'll start collecting cards. So when it's 11:10, I want to like last year.
No, 11:10. I'll send them all up to deliberation. All right, so thank you for your active participation. We're going to take a little 15-minute break. Carolyn and I will look through the questions. If they're change management questions, we're going to handle them after the second break. So we'll take a little 15-minute break. Hello.
Exactly. So that's where
Maybe we're taking.
I personally ready, but I need to see their answer.
No, we're not. You got a question?
Yep.
Ah, very good question.
Well, I do.
But that's the question.
The timer's not working. Okay, I started my timer. Okay, so we have a lot of questions.
2 chairs. A lot of them are the same, but
There's one similar banding system for staff. I am managed very experienced teachers taught for 20+ years. I've moved away from roles of the school of the teacher stopped doing or taking on roles has started doing. What impact did this have on the budget? Talk about having $200,000 in stipends, but anybody's salaries. Combined faculty and staff members. Was HR involved in the process of combine teaching and non-teaching faculty. I can say, I'll take that one, but that's a no because the role will have to be 50% of what teachers. And we have, I'll talk about, we have some upper school people students. Experienced, but their terms, no one had their minds. Students haven't been schools committed to employer
it's not working.
It's not working, sorry.
You have 11 minutes. You have 11 minutes and 12 seconds.
structure new, that's new. You know, like, and yes, in probably 18, 19, we'll need to shift.
I got people out there, I don't know what the conversation is.
We don't have that, but I've got a teacher who is an experienced teacher. We have a person who lives in a teacher band. You mean like what other schools were doing? Yes, David's market study did include looked at what schools were doing market study. In the report, there's something about we have the food stipends. Can you elaborate on the annual data streams, portfolios? Go back to slide 11, please. Didn't finish reading it.
So I'll tell everyone I did.
How do you manage the change in roles and activities? Is stipends to adjust salaries annually to reflect changes? I think when we're not adjusting salaries, we're in a market adjustment and we set the targets for 2 years. That's how we're doing it. There are some outliers like those can regards to athletics, how is coaching incorporated? Yeah, that one's already there. Explain how evaluation is different. Yeah, this one is current compensation system more expensive than the previous one. Talk specifically about faculty salaries versus appropriate for staff. I mean, I think that's a question that we're going to How and how quickly are the bands adjusted? Is this first one? I think there's one in.
Yeah, it is. It is. Oh, yeah.
Do you have bubbles? There's salaries are constant at the level. Did that impact this work? Yes. I mean, I think. Do you want to talk about well, I mean, I know the answer. The answer are most it's a whole bunch of people from 10 to 20 year mark who were really concentrated and who were the most out of work. Is there a frozen within the band? Yes. Are increases within the band arbitrary? No. There's ranking. Yeah, that's important. So mention that, and then also mention that the principal's work this summer is to agree on what the standards is.
No, we're not accepting any more.
I'm at Baldwin. We use David for our banding system.
Yeah, you're one of you're a year
Why are
ahead
you
of us.
here?
See, I thought we were a year behind you. I think what actually happened is
You moved
we
fast.
started after you, and we finished first.
Yeah.
And I liked your more thoughtful process here. We did not. We missed some key elements along the way because we pushed it a year too fast. We had an outgoing principal who wanted it pushed out before she left, and we would have been better served waiting.
That's
So,
really good advice for.
Yeah, it needs to be a more thoughtful process, and and the communication along the way. You know, we kept people updated, but I think that your model for that interaction and having your faculty as more of an active participant in the process. I think served you very well because there are some things that I'm dealing with now, implementing it after 2 years, that is problematic and falls on me.
Yeah.
But one thing we did do with ours is we also very kind of ambitious of us. We layered in our evaluation process at the same time. So when we rolled it out, we also rolled out the new evaluation process. A lot for them to absorb. It's a lot for us to understand. In some ways, it was helpful to have that evaluation piece going in with this, but I wish we'd taken the extra year.
I'm glad that we did the way we did because there's one-on-one conversations about band placement. Then re-informed. Remind me to say this. This got edited. Got a huge edit as a result of these conversations. Right. mean, there were fundamental changes that came out of the conversations we had with faculty about the descriptions and then how to put them in a way that was user valuable.
I'll put it up here so you.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. No, this is really good stuff. I appreciate all this information.
How did you choose? How do you place new teachers in lesson plans? Do you have something, operations information system? How do you handle additional off-contract work? Document assignment sheets. These are pretty sensitive. How often will you evaluate? This is the evaluate with money in the band. Can someone be frozen in the band? Yes.
Give it 5 minutes. We have about 5 more minutes, just so you know, 5 more minutes.
Are you paying temporary roles or taking roles like But it also related to budgets. Thank you. Because a person this is kind of interesting.
How's that one? Swap?
Yeah.
And then,
And I'm going to spend less time talking about the specific so there's one that I need to do around. Yeah, this one. There's no such thing as off contract.
we aren't accepting anymore, Steve.
Oh, look, it was underneath there.
Oh, we missed it. We missed it.
Band placement.
This one's a good one. Chemistry versus history. I'll go first and answer mine in a certain order, and then.
Do you want to do this? Teacher or not? I do want to do that. I like giving you a couple of non-teaching. Oh yeah, these are the uniforms.
Yeah.
Hi.
Coming from a head that thinks he's gonna leave. Because that's what he came.
Ah, okay.
So, you know.
No. A minute and a half.
Where are you in the process?
All right, I'm gonna start.
Going well? So if you could please take your seat, we'd like to start answering some of your questions, please. Okay, we sort of have a method to our madness in how we answer these questions. So we'll do the best we can, and our contact information will be on the last slide. But one of the questions was, can you please go back to slide 11? I didn't finish writing. They will absolutely make this PowerPoint available to all of you. So I'm not going to go back to slide 11, but you will get a copy of the whole presentation, which is probably even better. That was an easy one. 5 questions all regarding staff and what are we doing with staff. We're not doing any banding with staff. The whole staff piece has had to be managed along the way with so much attention on faculty and banding. I see smiles, you know what I'm talking about. And we're still working through the staff piece, but what we did for staff, we also did a market survey. I think we had something like 65 different specific staff positions, and a salary survey was done, and all of our staff are placed within that market survey data, and we're using a similar process, getting people to the midpoint for the staff. So there is no banding system for staff. Margaret will speak a little bit to some of those hybrid type people that teach some but not much, college counseling, some of those, but just the pure staff folks, that banding is not applied, just market data. So that's 5 questions. One person had asked, do you have an HRIS system and how was it used? We don't. A lot of Excel was used on this, and I think an HRIS system would be most welcome in streamlining some of this. Yeah, I should talk to the CFO. Couple questions, both while I was circulating and on cards, is how much did this cost? And for us, it was a big financial commitment, and remembering the size and scale of our school, it was about an $800,000 jump from. And that was because of market, not because of banding, right? So you have to look at your school to see where you're at. If you're already paying most of your faculty very competitively, you're not going to have that. But that's where we were at, and our budget could not absorb that. I can only sharpen my pencil, so pointy. And so we've been doing it in chunks, and have been explaining that that we're moving folks along as much as we can, as quickly as we can, based on our overall budget. Which brings me to another stack of questions regarding the bands themselves, right? So how often are we going to adjust them? How will we adjust them? So because it is a moving target, like it's not like we do these bands once and now we're done. So our current plan is to revisit the bands since the 17-18 letters are out before the 18-19 letters go out, and see what sliding up we need to do of each of the 4 bands. And as the CFO, crossing my fingers that enrollment and the rest of the budget will be able to accommodate that, so that we're not behind the 8 ball again. We have to keep up now that we've done all this good work. So those were, I think I got all the ones assigned to me, and Margaret has a big stack for her as well. And you wanted to mention about the faculty input on the bands.
Oh, right, okay. So my first question was about faculty members for the committee. The head of school solicited interest from across the faculty, sent out an email saying we were going to get this work started, and we had faculty members volunteer, and 2 of the faculty members that we actually chose came from the volunteers. The third person, we didn't actually have somebody from that division volunteer, and we wanted to have somebody from each division. So we asked the divisional principal and the faculty clerk of that faculty meeting to generate a couple of names, and then the head of school asked that person. When we started this work, The faculty that we hired, for whom we hired them in 15, 16, were hired into their bands because we knew that we were going to be doing this. We had already talked about with the faculty. We were working to place teachers, and we were in a really competitive market, and we had some very key roles to fill, and we wanted to hire our top candidates. So for both 15, 16 and for 16, 17, new teachers were hired into their complete full target, which has added an interesting wrinkle in the letters and appointment letters and salaries for 17, 18, because the teachers who were hired for this year, there are 5 of them, they are getting no raise for 17, 18, because we're doing a market adjustment, no COLA increases. So we had conversations with all of them to manage those expectations. So, and this year, our hiring process, we are hiring people into their band fully. How do we handle non-teaching experience in, I guess this means in hiring? Under a previous head, and in fact, I'm still helping a staff member work through this, there was very little credit given for non-teaching experience. Our current philosophy is that you come with a variety of experiences and that we need to honor those. And that it's very important to us to, again, attract the best people possible. And if you are coming to us with only a couple of years of teaching experience, but years in a different industry, we still want to be able to hire you if we think you are the best person for the job. Let's get that one. Without stipends, how do you deal with future reductions in teachers' formerly stipended roles? So for instance, if one of our middle school deans, that used to be a $2,000 stipend, which now got folded into the placement on the band, if she were to decide not to be middle school dean anymore, and we're past the market adjustment part of our process, depending on other things, her salary might be flat. She might get a smaller than the standard raise, or she might have had such a stellar year anyway that it wouldn't matter. So I think the question, though, is we pushed all those stipends into people's base salaries and their base job descriptions. What happens when somebody's role changes? We actually have 2 people right now who are, in fact, changing their roles. And because we're in a market adjustment, we aren't changing anything. Those 2 teachers, though, in the discussions with their divisional principals, know that their letters for 18-19 will reflect the change in their role and then whether or not how their evaluation goes for 18-19. So those conversations are happening. People know, and I think this was really interesting to think about, when I first talked to a lot of the other schools who are ahead of us in their process, that there are different reasons faculty members would decide to take on or give up roles having to do with where they are in their life cycle, whether they've got young children that they've suddenly now got, and so they don't have the time to be a dean of students, or in our case, a dorm head or a varsity lead coach. All of these things that are time consuming, they might decide to step away from, step back into. And we've talked with our faculty, and they are wrapping their heads around the idea that once we are fully into this system, their increase might be less because they have decided for family, personal, whatever reasons to step back from a role in the school. So we wouldn't see it as a stipend going away, but it would impact the increase. We don't see faculty being penalized and having pay subtracted, thank you, but in the way the increases would happen. All right. Did we combine teaching and non-teaching faculty into the bands? I mean, Carolyn said no. We do have, in the high school, we have some interesting, I would call them teaching administrators, our director of college counseling, our dean of students, the assistant dean, who consider themselves faculty, not staff. We did not put them into the band system. And when you look at the descriptions, you can see that they really don't fit. There was a question, and I'm going to get to that a little bit later, about all the different roles, coaching roles, dorm parenting. That was all built into our job descriptions, and I'll talk about that in a minute. A question about annual evaluations. This is the year that we are piloting our annual evaluations. And the form, the descriptions that you have, imagine that each of these bullet points, except for the first one about enters Westtown at 0 to 4 years, imagine that this had been put into a table, and each of these things, the basic expectation, sits in a table with all of them on the left side and a big box on the right. And faculty and their supervisor choose to highlight 1 or 2 areas in basic expectations that they feel that they did really well or that are a growing edge. And then the second part of the description for the example characteristics of excellence, that breaks down into 3 boxes in a table. And again, in the annual evaluation, we ask the faculty member to lift up 2 or 3 that they feel really are important. They want to make sure that they highlight. And then the divisional principal also reflects on 2, and they might be overlapped, there might not be. We have similar sheets for our athletic directors to fill out on our coaches and for our dean of students to fill out for our residential faculty. And all of that gets synthesized by the divisional director and ends up in a form that goes out to the faculty member. We are living into this system, to be quite honest, and the lower and middle school principals are getting through their faculty. I'm working with the upper school principal on how to manage the number of people in the upper school. And we are finding that we're probably going to have to make some changes, but we will continue to do annual evaluations. This summer, I anticipate the principals and I will spend a fair amount of our time together adjusting the system to work as we have now lived into it for a year. We are committed to annual evaluations, and within that doing a really comprehensive evaluation for first-year teachers and keeping our 360 evaluation every 4th year, which is committee-based. I'm on all the committees. We did 20 this year. And then there's a faculty clerk that does 3 or 4 of them. And then there's members of, different members make up the committees. And it's about a 3-week process for this 360 evaluation. We see that as both informing the bands and not informing the bands. You can imagine that if you are a faculty member on a committee, you are really nervous about being involved in a process that would impact a colleague's salary. So we have worked really hard to say that this is about professional growth, not about salary and evaluation for the 360. So we're also learning how to marry our 360 system with our new annual system. And that's that one. Can someone be frozen in the band? Yes. Can someone not move in the band? Yes. We have a teacher who's in the experienced teacher band who's been teaching probably for 17 years. And I anticipate that that person will finish their career in the experienced teacher band. Actually, they've been teaching 20 years altogether, 17 at Westtown. We do not anticipate that teacher making the jump to master teacher. A younger faculty member who had hit probably years 12, 13, 14, who a divisional principal felt wasn't going to make the step up to master teacher. They just never were able to perform at the level that was necessary or able to fulfill the description of master teacher. We would anticipate a divisional principal would be having a discussion with that person about moving on. And the way that our salary system works, there is, particularly at the experienced teacher band, there is a real kind of stop where you run out of salary increase bandwidth that's built into the system. So kind of that. And students haven't been mentioned. How do they provide input? Faculty who are in their first year at Westtown and in the 360 process, we survey their students. Some cases, we talk with them individually. We survey advisees. We survey all of our kids in grades 4 and up about their teachers. For our dorm faculty, we survey dorm residents. And the athletic directors survey teams at the end of every season. So there's a lot of survey data out there, both sort of, my teacher knows how to help me when I'm upset, never, rarely, often, sometimes, always. I think the sometimes and the often are reversed. To what does your teacher do well, which is just a verbatim box, or what areas might your teacher improve? Again, a verbatim box for us to fill in, for the students to fill in, and for us to make sense of. So the final one that I'll handle now, and then I'll take the rest of them after the second break, is, did you have bubbles where salaries were concentrated in a particular level, and did that impact the work? I think I mentioned earlier, our young faculty, because they were the most heavily stipended, they didn't see in their base salary that their increase, they did get an increase to the band system, and it was, for most of them, more than 2 or 3%. But a lot of that was their stipends. So if a young teacher had been paid, just because math's not my thing, at $10,000, including all of their stipends, the band might have only increased them to $11,000 or $12,000. The faculty who saw the biggest jump and who were the most closely clustered because of the way our salary ladder worked were the faculty between years 10, 12, and probably 15, 16. Because the steps in between each of those, the difference between each step was so small. In some cases, it was as little as $375 from year, I think, 11 to 12. It was a really small step. Those are the faculty who saw the biggest increases, and they're the ones that drove really Carolyn's budget. At the highest end, the people who'd been teaching 25, 30 years, they were pretty close to market.
Can I add one more thing?
Yeah.
Margaret asked me if we forgot to mention anything important, and I feel like this is a nugget that I should make sure we share. So there are the bands, and there's the placement within the bands. The way that worked with the principals, let's say that group identified that there were 20 faculty members who were in the experienced teacher band. They actually took all 20 of those and ranked them, so that there was a ranking system, all divisions, on how they compare to each other as far as their quality of teaching, contribution to the community, everything that's in the band description. So there was definitely a ranking to figure out where they all were relative to each other within the bands. So I feel like that's an important piece.
All right. I'm going to hold the rest of the questions until the next break because we can move on a little bit. I'm going to talk a little bit about, you have in front of you our 4 band descriptions. I should tell you that what you see is probably almost a complete overhaul from what was presented to the head of school in May of 2015. In large part because in the process of placing our faculty in bands and having those one-on-one conversations in the fall of 2015, the principals and I learned some really important things about how the language was and wasn't resonating. And this was even though the faculty had had input every step along the way. But in having those conversations, we learned some really important things about what was and wasn't actionable, didn't feel as though it could be measured either by the teacher or by the divisional director. So this document that you have was a complete rewrite last summer by the divisional directors and myself. And as I mentioned in the evaluation system, the evaluation language is word for word this language. So we're going to look a little bit at the experienced teacher band and how it aligns with Westtown's mission. And I will say one other kind of funny thing. The first time I went before the faculty with a draft, way back in 2014, of the band language, every single faculty meeting, so I went to all 3 divisions, they all said to me, "Excuse me, there's no mention of us being a Quaker school. You can see that now in each of the band's languages, the word Quaker shows up in the very top under basic expectations. So here's Westtown's mission. Carolyn and I asked you to bring your missions to think about. Westtown's mission is guided by the essential Quaker calling to seek out and honor that of God in each of us. Westtown School challenges its students to realize their individual gifts while learning and living together in a diverse community. Westtown inspires and prepares its graduates to be stewards and leaders of a better world. And I will say that when we looked at our salary system, our old salary system, and said, what does it have to do with our mission? We could find no connection to the mission. Our old salary system recognized years of teaching, willingness to take on new jobs, and if you had a master's degree, a single master's degree, that was what it recognized. This is our mission. We have become a very mission-driven school. When I take visitors around on campus, that's one of the things I'm really proud of, that they will write to me afterwards and say, wow, I really could see evidence of your school's mission in action. So it was important to us to have our faculty job descriptions and the bands fit with our mission. If you look at the mission within the band, I've highlighted on the slides the language. The places where there is just a complete, in our minds, in our faculty's minds, correlation between what we expect of our experienced teacher, in this case, and its correlation and support of the mission. And so we expect our experienced teachers to support and embed Quaker values and the philosophy in Westtown in all areas of their work, whether it's with parents, with advisees, on the athletic field, in the dorm, with colleagues. We expect that is just part of a basic expectation for our teachers. And this one, I mean, if you look all the way over at the faculty leader is expected to champion, not just support, but to champion the Quaker values and philosophy at Westtown. I mean, that's a high threshold for them to reach to. All right. Basic expectations it continued. The next one that I highlighted is that develops and maintains a classroom atmosphere that fosters learning. I mean, remember, we expect ourselves to be a learning institution. That's part of our mission. That we do this learning in a diverse community, so we expect our experienced teachers to be involved in the life of the school. To show up for school events, to participate actively in our, as ambassadors of the school. We tell all of our teachers that we are all involved in the work of admissions. That is just really critical to our success as a school. We have also this second section, characteristics of excellence. Because we believe that there's out of God in every child, that's part of our mission. We believe that we have to know our students well to call that out, and that is, again, direct relationship with our mission, and one of the ways in which we crafted each of the job descriptions to fit our mission. We also expect all of our faculty to, in their classrooms, to create experiences that enhance student learning through creativity, healthy risk-taking, and respect for peers and practicing empathy. Interestingly enough, this part about respect and empathy, that again was something that faculty said when they were having these one-on-one conversations with their divisional directors. This is what I think you want me to do. Where is it in the description? And so again, we were responding to them, being true to our mission, and trying to get even greater alignment. Listening deeply, if you're going to be able to know that and call that out of God in every child, you have to listen deeply. To do this well, you need to pursue and implement professional development to enhance their practice. We want our faculty to model lifelong learning, to model the journey of life, and to be the best teachers they can be. And also, our experienced teacher needs to foster collaborative and honest relationships among colleagues. At our school, it's really important that folks are collegial, that they're working, we're pushing and pulling people, people are pulling us to be more collaborative, to be more cross-disciplinary. This is both something that our faculty want and that will serve our mission well. We also have this one, the last one, demonstrates best practices in creating inclusive classrooms. That's part of learning in a diverse community. And again, you'll notice that, that in each of the descriptions, that language changes around best practices in creating inclusive classrooms, because the master teacher not only needs to demonstrate best practices, but needs to model and promote culturally competent practices with students and colleagues. And our faculty leader also needs to do that. We expect these job descriptions to help faculty see where they need to go in their careers. So that's a little bit of how we see our mission being expressed in our 4 job descriptions, our 4 band descriptions. They get operationalized in our evaluation system. We're going to head into workshop. Do you want to get lunch and workshop, or?
Yeah, people work better when they're fed.
Okay, so why don't we take about 5 minutes, 10 minutes, let's get food, and then while you're eating, Carolyn and I will get you started in the.
Are you ready? 2 minutes.
All right.
So why don't you give them their assignment?
All
and
right,
then we'll-
so this is your assignment. What I would love you to do is to write 2 short lists looking at your mission and your compensation system. And in list 1, list the alignments. Where does your current salary system align with your school's mission? And then the second list, where are they not aligned? So that's your assignment for about 5 minutes. And then lunch will be ready, and then we'll do the next step, all right? So now you're just looking at mission and salary.
Your experienced teacher slides were awesome. Yeah, that was really good. It probably was as good as at NAS, but it just was very clear. I liked it a lot.
And NAS, I listed all of them, though, and
Yeah.
we spent too much time.
Yeah, focusing on the bold and how they change between that was really, really good. Are those the questions that are done, the ones underneath? 'Cause
Yeah.
I'll just add them to my upside down.
Where'd I put them? No, what'd I do with them? Interesting. I keep
Oh, I took
losing
them.
things.
Sorry, I took
All right, that's good. Yeah, no, these are the ones. This is slide 11.
Oh, yep.
How do you manage has been top journalist? That is, the teacher stopped doing or taking on roles outside of classroom. All right, that one I can.
And this one I didn't answer and should have. And there's
You did answer that one. And I did answer this one. I'll handle that one.
athletics.
Oh,
Did we sort of cover that? Because I think you said you were going to speak to that
yeah,
more.
I'll speak to that more.
Okay. And I'll answer this
Yeah.
one. I'm going to run to the
Okay.
question. So at 11:58, we can tell them they're done.
Yeah.
right? Like, we want the flexibility to get our sale, get her here. We bring her in over somebody we already got here. Good. That's where the flexibility gets a little bit tricky for me, especially on the hiring until they. So you don't know how you assume. Oh, when you hire that new person, how they're going to fit into your mission and culture and delivery based on. But we know hiring is a mixed bag of joy. And what happens when you hire someone as a master teacher? You go, ooh, maybe not so much. They're moving on. But yeah, I guess that's it. I mean, so one hand. Right. Yes.
Sorry to interrupt all the good conversation, but it's for a good reason. Lunch is served, so please help yourself, and we'll reconvene in 15, 20 minutes. How you doing now?
Really well done.
Is it working?
Yeah, yeah. Well, you had some practice.
Well,
yeah.
she's the lead. I'm just the sideshow.
But the amount, it's pretty clear to me, the amount of personal time, ultimately, she invested in this.
And the principals, yeah.
Huge. A lot of time talking to me.
Here's interesting because Baldwin's here, and they're ahead of us.
Okay.
They started after us but finished before us, and she's saying that she's had to dig out a lot of problems because it went too fast. But their departing head of school wanted it done before she left.
Oh, okay.
So it's interesting to hear the dangers of rushing.
I am fascinated by the role that your mission has played, and I went to one of the best presentations that I went to. I'm going to bring in a couple of weeks by webinar.
Oh, good.
It's Bob Whalen, who literally used the mission and the investment in it as to turn the school around.
That's even better.
No, well, I don't know what the impact is, because you assess that part. The way it went about it.
They're Hawaii invited, yeah. And then we have some Phyllis Andover too. I'm in a group with them, and they were just practicing. I'm like, well, just come to this. They flew down. That's very neat.
You're among the people I don't know, and there's some here, but I'm delighted.
So yeah, the gentleman in the black shirt, make sure you give him a nice welcome.
Sure, it's for
And the woman sitting next to Nancy Long in the black with her hair in the front.
Okay, yeah.
Her.
Yeah.
And they're so She's over getting food in the striped sweater. So if you could say hi to those three, that would be a lot.
We want to do that.
It's more than the stuff that keeps the school running. That's right. I had one of my questions.
Yeah, right. I bet Philip was saying somebody might.
My mind is spinning. Safe travels.
What? She's seen it done. He's falling down. No word, but I said, well, how do you get this? Oh, I know. Yeah, I mean, she's up for her human lab. Sorry, we lost some of those scores for days.
Get another crowd. I'm like, oh.
So now we're to this report your, and I could cue them up to do that. All right, so I'm going to ask you to think about shifting from pure socializing to the, hopefully you've got a list of your alignments and non-alignments. And what I'd love for you to do is to now shift through and think about your alignments and disconnects with a partner at your school or somebody sitting next to you. And think about those non-alignments in particular. And are there areas of those non-aligned things between your mission and your salary that you'd like to consider further? And in those considerations, what are you wondering about? What as you think about your mission and your current salary system, what are you noticing? What is it bringing up to mind? What are questions you have about whether or not your current salary system is helping you as a school achieve your mission? So we'll do that. Carolyn and I will finish our own lunch, and so in about 10 minutes, we'll finish this part up and move on to the next part. So about 10 minutes to think about with someone your alignments and non-alignments. Yeah, which is true. I mean, think about like Margaret, we didn't have that. Everybody was close. Now, and I would say that our younger faculty were closer to Margaret than our mid-faculty. Because remember, they're the ones that had the biggest. I encourage her, A, to maybe talk to you, but B, also brainstorm with people who are conversation experts. That's the whole think about ways that, and I say, then you might have different yeah. My Green Street friends, when they did this, everybody was, they CFO, and they looked out before it made it happen. Everybody had a reason. We didn't do that. We guaranteed everybody would wear the same percentage. Now, some people got more than 8%. Not a lot, but everybody got 8%. And everybody got placed into their second band. I think their model is predicated on years teaching.
Or on student experience at all.
I think that first band has big flex in it.
And now another layer of people there seeing it.
Four is just such a good number. I think 3 would have felt good for you, and 5 would have felt too many. If I had to, I probably would pick 5 over 3, but still 4 is really.
the next section. Because then they'll be free.
Question?
I don't know. I think it's comparable to Westtown, maybe it's and neither of them experienced the hemorrhage that Westtown experienced from 9 to 10. Lower school, I mean, lower school went through 4 principals. 5 years. So Susan Temple, an associate head, and that hearing was principal and Barbara McKay's. And in the middle of that, there was the financial crisis and the 2 toxic families who just pulled families right out of the floor. And it was all of these things happened at the same time. Where did wow. And they were families who was lower those teachers in there. There was a point in 2008, that's what I can tell you what it's like to teach. There was 6 fourth graders and 2 classrooms. And then there were 2 this year's 5th grade, which they got to how many kids were class in there. And those kids were get to 2008, high school faculty have and haven't experienced, they know that we are small. They know that they have experienced dorm parents who have 3 sections to 4 sections. They don't have this visceral visual sense of what it means to go from 18 to 20 kids who have homework to 10. And many of them don't really the reason high schools stay forward is because all so I had a parent in my cohort something because of course we need to drive this for high school because we are the ones that fund the school. And Karen said, actually no, the financial model is based on the growers of households going up excess income so that we can run this incredibly expensive school in which the most handicapped parents, significant numbers of kids are unfortunate. She said MSI is just huge. Like, she had no concept of it. And after school faculty just I had one of them tell me the first year the cohorts there was really terrible because they were losing so much faculty. And I asked them, I said, so what would be your preference? They said, oh, any other day of the week, you know, faculty may touch really hard. I said, you realize that your lower middle school colleagues are teaching time and aren't complaining. And they're like, I'm worried about teaching time. Which is another reason why I am loath about the cohorts. Is to go back to the place where people don't know each other and people say, I mean, it is one of my criteria for how great another teacher is not the first time, but after you like we'll have students and lots of I am a big fan of second teachers and she still doesn't know. Even if the English teachers say
That's one thing. I do think knowing sight people is really important. That's one thing I do.
So should we do this next slide and then the questions?
Keep the conversation going.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. Otherwise, we'll just start and stop.
All right. So one last shift in your conversation, or maybe the next step if you aren't already there, and then Carolyn and I will answer some more of the questions. But we'd like you to spend a little time thinking about, brainstorm how you could see your mission being expressed through your compensation and evaluation system. So again, a little forward thinking about how you could see taking what you have, your mission, and seeing it expressed through compensation and evaluation. We'll do that for maybe another 10 minutes while we finish up lunch, and then Carolyn and I will stop us and we'll answer some more questions. And if you have more questions, be sure to bring them up. All right, so another 5 or 10 minutes.
I just want to interrupt you for a moment. How many of you are looking for CPE credits for today's workshop? If you are, see Ron at the end of the meeting. He'll be outside the door and you need to sign off with him, okay? Thank you.
Yep. All right. Do you want to do first? You're still leaving.
This is the only one I have.
This one? All right, so I'm going to answer a few more of your questions, and we'll move on into talking a little bit about change management and our experience at Westtown and how you might think about it. So one of the questions was about whether or not when we did our market study, we took into account stipends at other schools, and the answer is yes. When David Lacey did our market study, he actually asked questions about stipends. So we actually knew which of our comparable schools were paying stipends, how many they were paying, what kinds of things. So we actually had that data also when we were doing that. Someone asked about human resources and how they were involved in the process. In the initial committee, human resources was not a part of our committee. We did have and do have a director of human resources who has since come on to help us in this work. As it turns out, the man that is currently our director of human resources was known to Karen Illig and had trained and worked with David Lacey. So now we have a man named Larry Polanski at Westtown, and then Nancy Long, who's here, is our other member of our HR committee, community department. And they both help us understand the how to translate, particularly in new hires, a potential candidate's experience and how they may or may not fit within our system. That's kind of the work that they do. How do you manage the very experienced teacher who's taught for 20 plus years and has moved away from roles at the school other than teaching? That is, the teacher has stopped doing or taking on roles outside of the classroom. I mean, I did mention this one teacher at Westtown who will never move out of the experienced teacher band and will probably finish their career there. One of our teachers who is really clear is a faculty leader, had been department chair, had been a dean of students earlier in his career, and has really stepped away from doing those kinds of things. What he has done is chaired really significant committees for the head of school. So his work has really been of two kinds. In the classroom with his students, and for a high school teacher, that's a real, that's only a portion of the job, and yet he is one of the go-to people the head of school calls on to do things like clerk our committee that looked at our residential life program as part of the strategic plan and helped shift Westtown's boarding requirement. You have to imagine a 200-year-old school looking at its boarding requirement and actually changing it. And to have somebody who had the confidence of the alumni and the faculty and the board do that work. So this person very much is doing very little outside of the classroom except really critical leadership. There are some faculty who could be faculty leaders who are at this point in their career only in the classroom, doing fine work in the classroom, and they are not doing significant things for the head of school. I would anticipate that going forward, they will not ever be promoted to faculty leader unless something significant changes, and that their increase in salary beginning in 18, 19 there'll be some implications for that, for being a good teacher in the classroom, but not starting new things, not creating new units, not doing things that help move the school forward or the division forward. So, how often does a member apply to move to bands and get reseated? We aren't, except for in a couple really, really extraordinary cases, moving anybody between bands from the 16-17 to 17-18 contract years. We are inviting 3 experienced teachers to apply for being moved in 18-19 to master teacher. And the process is they have taught at least 12 years, they have a master's degree, and in the opinion of their divisional director, they are actually fulfilling many, many of the aspects of the master teacher band. So over the summer, they'll prepare a portfolio, and then they will meet with our new head of school and myself, their division director, and another master teacher that will be chosen actually probably by me, to sit with them and review their portfolio and talk with them about the expectations for being a master teacher. There are some very clear expectations. All of our master teachers are expected to be a mentor to a new faculty member or a peer coach. It is just, we used to have stipends for that. Now it is part of the job description. And there's also an expectation that on a regular basis, you are creating new program, leading initiatives within your division for a cross-divisional group or in some other manner. And we would want to see evidence of that when they are still experienced teachers. So how often does that faculty move up a band? It depends on where they are kind of in their years of teaching. I mean, really it does. You have to be there at 12 years before you can move up. You have to have been teaching 5 years before you get moved to the experienced teacher. So that's a little bit, like not every teacher in the starting teacher band is going to be asking the principal, do I get to move? Do I get to move? They got to be there 5 years. Hopefully that answers. In regards to athletics, how is coaching incorporated into the band system? I was explaining to one group, our full-time upper school position used to work out to, you're involved in the residential program, you taught 4 sections, and you did 2 seasons in our co-curricular program. And those 2 seasons were worth 3 points. And different things that happened in the co-curricular program had a different point value, everywhere from 1 point being a class advisor, the junior class advisor, to 4 points for 1 season of being the lead varsity coach. And for every point over 3, you got a $1,000 stipend. So if you did 2 seasons of being a varsity coach, which many of them did, you actually got, that would be 4 points, 4 extra points, and $4,000 stipend. The upper school principal and I and the athletic director redid the way we calculate what it means to be a full-time upper school teacher. And we assigned points to everything from teaching a section, I think it's been a year or 2 since I looked at the numbers, but it's about 8 points. So that's 4 times 8 is 32. Being a varsity coach, I think, is worth 5. You're aiming for between 45 and 50 points. We don't tell every teacher they have to get to 46 points. Someplace in that range is what it means to be a full-time teacher. People who are light-loaded, the divisional director has talked with them about that every year to figure out new ways for them to support the school, everything from Model UN to one person who was very light-loaded offered to, on her own initiative, begin language tables in our dining lunch program. And so now she hosts language tables, and that's been a real gift to the school, great for the program, and it has helped fill out her total point value. So we did have to redo the way an upper school faculty's job was calculated to pull it into the realm of what made sense. And to recognize that athletic coaches, particularly at the varsity lead level, have a bigger commitment of their time than the person who's doing Model UN 3 weekends out of the year. So, is there a difference in the market? Have we had to pay in the market when we've gone after a chemistry teacher more than a history teacher? We haven't had that experience yet. So far, 2 or 3 years in, we've been able to hire the people we want and not necessarily have paid what looks like on paper an equally credentialed history teacher and chemistry teacher more for the chemistry teacher. I mean, chemistry and math teachers are harder to find. This year we had 2 math hires to make, and interestingly enough, it was a really challenging market. There weren't a lot of math teachers. We also had some budget constraints. Our math department is really strong, and we had We were replacing 2 young teachers, and that's what we needed to hire, were young teachers. We didn't have the flex in this year to say, we're losing this young man who's taught for 4 years, let's go out and hire the whatever math teacher we want. We still have constraints. We had to hire a young math teacher.
That's my fault.
Yeah. She's always saying no. No, she says yes a lot. So I mentioned the upper school load is 5 sections. The middle school load is 4 sections also, and then the lower school is kind of different. Lower school is you're a homeroom teacher, and those kids are your responsibility. And the art teacher teaches an equivalent number of sections and time that we work on to figure that out. I assume that there is a number of years' experience in and out of Westtown. When we hire people into our system, we hire them in based on their years of experience. And they come into the band. They come into the band because they've taught 2 years someplace else. They were in college 3 years ago, and we hire them in right there. I was telling one group, we were conservative in teachers, hiring a couple of teachers who could have been, because they'd been teaching 13, 14 years, we could have hired them into the master teacher band for the year we're currently living in, 16, 17. We actually hired them into the experienced teacher band. They are one of the only 2 or 3 teachers that we are actually moving for purely administrative choice reasons to the master band for this upcoming year, because they had incredible years. We were a little bit unsure hiring them, and they've proven that they are worth everything that we hoped for. So, temporary teachers or part-time teachers. Part-time teachers also get placed into the bands, and then if you're 50%, you get 50% of your placement salary. I will also say that one shift for us culturally, when I first took on my role as assistant head and was running and was really rolling out the 360 evaluation system, I had part-time teachers tell me, oh no, I don't get evaluated, I'm part-time. And these were people who had been there long years, lots of years. We work really hard to treat our part-time people the same as everybody else now, which is important. As for people that are only, we have a robust, every middle and upper school student participates in our athletic co-curricular program. That's a lot of coaches, more coaches than and positions than we can fill with our full-time faculty and staff. We do pay coaches from what we call outside the school who come in just to be the lead coach for the cross-country team or the girls lacrosse team. We pay them a separate salary, and that's just a completely separate thing. So, and I do love it. That one, I think should we go on to change management? All right. And if you have more questions, Carolyn and I are happy to help them answer them as we go. We're going to go through quickly, sort of thinking about change management, and then wrap up. I would say that if a Quaker school can do this type of change, I think anybody can do it. Carolyn and I have already talked about involving key constituencies at every step of the way. And I should say, if a Quaker school can do it, that's because our faculty feel like they really have a role in making decisions. And the alumni feel like they have a role and a voice in what happens in the school, and everybody else in between, and parents. So we were able to do this. We've also said incorporate feedback, address concerns, report out, report out, report out. I will say that when I started this work, our committee hoped to give a report to the head of school at the end of that year. So we started in September, and the head of school, we were thinking we would give him a report and be finished the following spring. And we gave him our report a whole nother spring after that. And I have to say I'm really glad that we did. I think we got some things right that we wouldn't have gotten right if we had moved faster. And in doing that, we were able to build a lot of support among administrators, among the faculty, and one of our division directors, who was very concerned about the way faculty were going to react. She had a lot of senior faculty. By the time we did this, and the division principals and I spent that summer working, she was ready for that work. A summer before, she would not have been, and the result would have been very different. This is a lovely model that I actually usually have hanging in my office. And I can point to all of the times when change at Westtown, or I've been responsible for something, and I can tell you how it went wrong. I think this resources one, the green one there, I mean, that's the Carolyn piece. If we couldn't have done this from a financial standpoint, we never would have gotten off the ground. It was really important that this worked the way it did. I know one of the schools that did this ahead of us chose a different way of rolling it out, but their board had approved they're a much smaller school, every faculty member got at least an 8% raise the year that they rolled out their faculty band system. We weren't in a position to do that for everybody. I will say many of our mid-career faculty in just that first year got at least an 8% raise. We had some senior faculty who got barely 1%, but we had the finances to do it. We had incentives for everybody in the system. I think that's really important. The skills piece, we took a lot of time, the division directors and myself and our head of school, building our own skills in evaluating faculty. That was really, I think, highly important. Our head of school had to set a vision for what he wanted. And then, as I said, we've had to have this action plan, which from when we handed the report to the head of school to now, we have a plan that we continually go back to check and see where we are in relationship to it. I think that is, I think for this time, we can point to success because we had all of those pieces in place. In all of our schools, there are difficult pieces to manage. I love this. I actually saw this this is not original to me. I was at a conference 2 falls ago, and we were talking about significant change, and one of the slides was a boulder in the road. And the language was, what are the boulders? What are the things that just you got to take into account, be they political, human, structural, symbolic, financial, historical? I think at Westtown, one of the symbolic things was this idea of equality, and everybody's treated the same. That was highly symbolic, and the old ladder at least appeared to represent that. In reality, by the time you had all the stipends in, it didn't, and there were some other things too, but we had to work through that. So I think it's really important to think not only the difficult pieces for you to manage, but also who your key constituencies are. I mean, each of our schools is different. Some of our schools are more top-down. Some of them are even more egalitarian than Westtown. And so to think about what that would look like. So back to the workshop part, we just have a couple more slides, but why don't you take a few minutes, 5 minutes, and think about out loud at your table who these difficult things to manage, what they are that would be difficult at your school. I mean, my hope and Carolyn's hope is that you leave here already thinking about what is going to be a challenge for you to do this work, and who do you need to involve in the work. So 5 minutes, and then we'll head into the wrap-up.
Super well done. I really like that slide.
I got it from Nancy, who got it from the Quaker leadership. And
Now, you guys, are you done with it? We
do have, she starts July 1.
So I just, if you've got people like that now.
Yeah.
Not at all.
I don't think so, although I know that that discussion happened between the current head and each future potential finalist about why this was important.
I would think we have to find someone who's committed to this compensation practice and process.
Particularly since we are still in the process.
Yeah, right, exactly.
It's not completely a part
I mean,
of
it came up more in an informational kind of way versus support this philosophy because she'll have to support it.
Yeah, I mean, since the board is behind this, I mean, the board is behind the board.
I know, we all know.
Yeah.
Sort of.
Yeah,
Kind of, but it depends. And unfortunately, since I've got great experience this year, going back on the inside, doing the same school, being on the board, but being on the inside, sort of looking back and forth, the board is about some of the fundamental things missing in this place. And we're trying to talk about the far left. I used to work the whole way to get rid of this. Not great.
But this stuff doesn't exist. This is fundamental school policy stuff. We've got everything coming in, and we need to really get some key people, the school administrators, to sit down and discuss
Smack into it. She's gonna see. It's like a
Well, that's
glass
what
door that doesn't.
a big role. We have a transition committee that's dedicated to all the facets of the transition, and that I'm sure will be
One of
another
them,
piece.
See the transition committee and Alice
one
is
of them has
throwing
been
a party.
pretty involved and wasn't one of those that said, doing this, like, who paid attention, meeting over meeting, which has been huge.
I just remember my dad followed it. There was this philosophy a long time ago in dress society. All this training, they trained the entire campus in all this stuff.
Someone new came on
Well,
and
yeah, the new president came in, and the theory was that all the ideas were percolated, you know, make the best of everything else. And the president was former Catholic priest. So it was like,
Yeah.
just evaporated. And I was like, we spent on this process. What do you mean? There's not much of that, not anything in any of it. This is sort of people who are doing work. These are running the school right there. And it's like, man, but you know, you lose all that. So you know when you're trying to do anything in there. You're all gonna say this is something like,
we're cautiously optimistic, more optimistic than cautious. I think that she'll really just. I mean, it'd be really hard to argue against aligning compensation and pension. Like that'd be a really tough sell.
I know, but your mission is so nice. I looked at it, I really wait because I have a high quality education system. Well, not someone brings a board. Everybody doesn't really talk about it.
So maybe some people's takeaway from here is we miss your mission.
I mean, I'm on Frankfurt Friends School Committee, and that's one of the things we have to do because their mission is like that. It doesn't generic. It's too generic. Now, getting members of the rest of the school committee to understand that we have this mission. Okay.
Sorry. No, thank you.
So do you want me to answer this or just let that be between us and I mean, I can't really say for sure that Tori is on board. Just us. Okay. All right. To kind of wrap up, when Carolyn and I did this at NAS, our last writing prompt was to encourage everybody to actually write down a big and aspirational vision for what you would like to do. I think it's also kind of 1 o'clock in the afternoon. We've been here a while. This is in our presentation, but I would encourage you to do that. I would encourage you to go back to your school, to think about this with whoever you're going to think about it and write a big aspirational goal for this work. And it might be that we need to rewrite our mission. Like your mission may not feel like something for which you can actually align a salary system or an evaluation system or create something totally new. It might be that you want to become known as the school in your area that does this better than anybody else, and people are knocking on your door to come work for you. Certainly that is one of my own aspirations for this system, that as we continue to move into it and make it hopefully really hum, that people will think of Westtown as a place they want to come work, not just a place to come send their kids, because if we have great teachers, of course, we all know great teachers bring great students to the door. So the last thing that you have in your handout is, that's that one, there's a timeline. I believe that there was a timeline handed out. It was one of the handouts, and it has my graphics design person at Westtown, when I first gave him all this data and said, I want you to put this on a timeline, he laughed at me, and this is what he created, what you see on the screen, because this is Westtown's timeline. And so for you to think about, as you go back to your school, what would yours look like? You know, each of us, our schools have different processes, different ways of operating, different ways of how quickly we do or don't adapt. But we've given you here all of our major steps in the process. So how would you do this work as you go forward? And so that would be the next step, that you walk away with a timeline. Are there any final questions that people have that come up that we haven't addressed as we've gone through your cards? Yes. Oh, Carolyn, you want to talk about that?
Sure, Nancy can.
Or we can bring up Nancy and she can talk
What
about it.
specifically? I mean, just.
So how does that factor in based on the different benefits? Does it matter who you are and what you get?
No. So all our faculty have the same benefits package. That doesn't vary by band.
Right, and the 403B contribution is the same whether you're starting teacher or faculty leader. The same health insurance is the same. The same offerings, yeah.
Same percentage contributions.
Yes. Yes.
Do you have any data on what numbers of schools, like large, medium, small schools are actually doing this?
No, although there is an article that's here in the presentation, which was in, which one is this? Oh, the Independent Schools Next Top Model, Changing Perspectives. I mean, it's a little dated, 2015, but that did list some schools. David Lacey would have a good sense of the schools he's worked with, how many schools, but I don't personally know. And I don't present myself as an expert on faculty banding as a salary system, just Westtown and its experience, and the schools in our local market that we are aware of. Yes?
At what point in the process did you start thinking about this capital that you needed to implement the ban to save $100,000? Was the finance committee right away, and what was their input?
So Karen Illig, the previous CFO, had before John Baird formed the committee, she and John had actually worked together to see if there was a way of making this happen from a financial standpoint. And then the finance committee, that they were brought into it when we actually had a committee and were working with a consultant. So before that, I had actually gone before the board to talk about evaluation, to talk about how we were moving forward, and to talk about how challenging our previous 2 hiring years had been. The Finance Committee, of course, approves, sends up a budget to the full board, and they worked with Carolyn to actually come up with a plan for the funding for the first year, which was an increase. I mean, we had to find the money. Yes?
On that point, did you fundraise specifically for the change effort?
No. Yes? So I'm going to let Carolyn answer that. I will say that, remember, we had two scales, one for people who lived in school housing, and they were paid significantly less than their counterpart who had to go out and pay a mortgage or rent. Not enough to pay your mortgage or rent, but there was a difference. That housing is built into the philosophy is you have to live in the dorm, we have to provide you with housing. And so now there's no differential for that, and it doesn't show up in the offer letter. But your job requires you to live in housing, and we provide it. But I'm going to let Carolyn answer it a little bit.
So specific salary data, no. and I'm not a mean lady, but we just really can't provide that level of detail for collusion reasons. But there's a lot of salary data, particularly the PAISBOA salary data that gives you very detailed ranges for varying levels of experience. So that would be where I would go to look at that information. Yes. Yes.
Okay, I think I have a two-part question.
Then it's definitely Margaret will answer it.
Do you have a vision that you would do a banding program and then the review process? Or did you, so did you know you were doing step one and step two? Or did one inform the other? Is that part of the interviews at the same time?
So I have a convoluted answer. The board made it clear that annual evaluations were going to be key to any movement on their part to find additional funds to pay the faculty more. Their position was, we recognize that we're below market. We hear you saying that you're having problems hiring great teachers. And we have this study from parents saying that you have uneven faculty. So you need to work with us. So the two actually came together. And Carolyn talked about this rate and rank system that we did. So we created the band descriptions. And then the principals and I went through and said, this teacher is band 2. They've been teaching for like 10 years. And we feel like 10 years would put you about 88% into the band. So remember, you start at 80%, you're headed towards 100%, not 120. And then we went through and looked at all those people and said, well, this teacher, they've kind of been coasting for a bunch of years. They haven't gotten their master's degree. This teacher has, so let's adjust one up, one down. And so we did this really comprehensive ranking. We met with all the teachers to explain that to them about their band placement. And then this year, we're living into providing them with an annual evaluation. Does that make sense?
It totally does, and I just, since it's so many years, I was wondering if in retrospect you think that you could have compressed that.
I don't think that we could have compressed it. If we had already in place a robust annual evaluation system, I could see how that would have changed the timeline a bit. I will say one of the reasons that I'm committed to annual evaluations of one sort or another, even though it's clear we're going to have to adjust how we do it, is if the system is going to have the integrity and the faculty are going to have confidence in it going forward when we get to the place where your raise is going to not be a standard COLA raise that everybody gets, you've got to know that your divisional principal sees you and knows what you've done and has signaled to you whether what you're doing is valued. And if it's not, that's a different conversation. But I don't want people to be surprised or wondering, what do you mean I didn't get a raise in a year in 1819? Or, 1819. Numbers are not my strength. That's why I'm a history major.
So just truth in advertising, we're a school, local school, we actually use David Lacey as a consultant as well, and we implemented some of the system. I'd say that the one thing that sort of tripped us up, this is our first year of having placed folks into bands. If we had a robust evaluation system that we all had confidence in beforehand, I think we would have had an easier time with the conversations about placing in bands. So for those who are wondering how to do that, I think that evaluation system is key, because then there are fewer questions about where we stand and
And I will say that, when I first started presenting to the board 7 years ago on this, we were just piloting our 360 system. By the time the principals and I were sitting down to place everybody, I knew that every faculty member had had an evaluation within the past 4 years. And because everybody had been through the system or they had been hired since then. And we do an annual evaluation for all of our new teachers. So to your point, we didn't have the evaluation system we're living into, but we had a robust enough one that faculty already knew that they had been seen and that they had evaluations for them to stand on, for the principals to stand on too. Yes?
How much weighting did you apply to having a master's degree as a student?
For being a starting teacher, I mean, a master's degree in dollars at Westtown used to be a $2,000 stipend, essentially. So when we place people in the bands this go round, we just kept that entire. The principals and I, that's one of our conversations this summer, is what is that worth going forward? Do we think that makes sense? How about the second degree? I'm currently, one of the questions was, since we require a master's, do we support that? And the answer is yes. Not as robustly maybe as we would like, but for a first master's degree, Westtown does support at $4,000 a year towards your master's degree. Now, if you're going to do a concentrated program at Columbia Teachers College over 2 fiscal years, you're going to have to fund that a lot yourself. But if you're going to do, I've got teachers at Temple, I've got teachers at Westchester who are doing 1 class a semester. Like in 4 years, they'll have their degree, and we will have supported them a lot. We also now have been able to carve out money for PhDs and second degrees. So I've got teachers right now working on an MFA, that's their second degree. I've got 2 PhD folks working on PhDs, which we didn't used to fund because it didn't matter. Now we want to support continuing development, and that first degree is a must to get from experience to master, and so we must support it. Yes? We do. And in fact, this year I have a young teacher whom we are actually pulling back tuition because they're going off to do a wonderful adventure next year, but they're not going to be here at Westtown next year. So, yes.
All right. I want to talk about the parallel system between your faculty degrees now, and I think you did a brilliant job of multi-level competencies on your bands. Is there a program, is there a hope to create a program for staff at the university?
Yes, and in fact, the way it's worked out on the staff side is it's really, in my mind, there is a sense that's going to help us continue to build an entire adult community, collegial community at Westtown. Westtown staff next year will also be moving into a merit pay system. So we have been working hard on evaluations for staff, and we've been changing up our staff evaluation form and system and tweaking it. And the administrative council, which is all of the top administrators, one of our topics this summer for our retreat is to look at all those systems and really make sure that we've got the one we want going into next year. So this year, for the staff, I mean, and that's another piece of managing expectations. Our staff have listened to us say for 5 years now that the faculty were underpaid, and they're wondering, what about us? As you know, when you're hiring staff, you're hiring off the market, so you really are probably on your staff side much closer to what's out there. However, we did do a market study for 60-some positions, created ranges, used descriptions, and now we have a salary range for each of those positions. And what we found was that actually we're pretty close. So there are a few staff who are going to get a market adjustment. Everybody else is going to get a cost of living, and that's kind of where we are this year. Was that accurate? Yep. Yeah. Yes. Almost from the beginning. So from when John and Karen Illig sat down and started talking about this, Karen recommended that we hire David Lacey, and we did. Yes? I don't know. I don't write the checks.
I do, but each school's different, so you'll have to talk to him. And there are other consultants too. I mean, depending on his schedule and availability, I mean, there are other people doing this work as well. That just happens to be who several of us in this community have used.
And I would say that independent school management, their consultants, this is something, I mean, I remember talking with Terry Moore from ISM about faculty evaluation when we were to that point of saying, all right, we're going to do this. What will the evaluation look like? So I think one last question. How do we fund it? How do we pay for the first year?
Magic. You know, that little drawer with $1 million. I really have been focusing on the budget and making sure program costs are either retained or increased, and administrative costs and program support costs that aren't directly touching our students, sharpening my pencil on all of that. But we have had the fortune of uptick in enrollment too. And our language all along has been to the faculty, this is what we aspire to do. We hope to get you halfway there in 1 year and the rest of the way in year 2. And you can put 100 different clarifying comments around that and they'll just hear promises, right? So it's really good to know your numbers and try your best to set expectations about financing it if you're under market, right? That not everyone would necessarily be in that position.
And I will say one bucket, which is an amount of money we've already talked about, that $200,000 in stipends, which were not part of the salary budget, were pulled into the salary budget. So that was some of it right there.
So we're available for.
Yeah. So I think, thank you very much. You've been wonderful audience. These have been great questions. Carolyn and I will, thank you. We'll stay for a while to answer any questions offline, but and our contact information is right here. So, and also I think Aggie's going to share the presentation.
Yes. Yes. Well, thank you, Carolyn and Margaret. This has been a great day for PAISBOA. We really appreciate all the effort that you put forth here. We'll be sharing the PowerPoint presentation with all of you. We'll also be sharing the video of this presentation with all of you. I know. Hope you all did your hair today. So that's that. And then CPE credits, check with Ron if you are expecting CPE credits. We will manage that for you. And if you are not a member of PAISBOA and you would like to become a member of PAISBOA, by all means, come chat with me and I'd be happy to help you out with that. So thank you all for being here today. Thank you for playing nice with each other and participating. You obviously got a lot out of it, and that's because you worked really hard today. So thank you very much.